The house? The car? All mine, Ethan announced, laughing as he clutched his mistress like a trophy. I stood frozen, but my fingers brushed the cold metal of the flash drive in my pocket. My lawyer squeezed my arm to keep me steady. Let him enjoy this moment. He thought he was walking away with everything, but he was actually walking straight into the trap I had spent 6 months building. My name is Megan Callahan, and at 33 years old, I stood on the cold limestone steps of the Harbor Point Courthouse and watched my life disintegrate into a public spectacle. The morning air was biting, but the chill I felt had nothing to do with the weather. I watched the heavy oak doors swing open, and there was Ethan, the man I had shared a bed with for 6 years, walking out into the sunlight. He was not alone. Blair was tucked under his arm, her head resting on his shoulder as if they were posing for a magazine cover rather than leaving a bitter divorce hearing. They descended the stairs with the casual arrogance of celebrities walking a red carpet, completely indifferent to the devastation they left in their wake. Ethan stopped 3 steps down, right where the crowd of morning commuters and lingering lawyers could see him. He looked sharp in the navy suit I had bought him for his promotion last year. He turned back toward me, his eyes bright with malice. He wanted an audience. He raised his voice, pitching it loud enough to cut through the noise of the city traffic. "The house, the car, all mine," he announced, his laughter booming off the stone pillars. He squeezed Blair tighter, and she giggled, a sharp, tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. Ethan looked directly at me and winked. It was a gesture of total dismissal. In his eyes, I was no longer his wife or his partner. I was just a nuisance he had successfully removed. I was a joke. My entire body went rigid. The humiliation burned hot under my skin, threatening to rise up and choke me. But my right hand moved instinctively. It slid deep into the pocket of my wool coat until my fingers brushed against cold metal. It was a small, silver USB drive. I ran my thumb over its smooth surface, grounding myself. It was such a small thing, easily overlooked. Ethan never paid attention to details like that. He saw the coat, but he never wondered what I carried inside it. That blindness was his fatal flaw. He thought he had stripped me of everything, but I was holding his destruction in the palm of my hand. Blair steered him toward the sidewalk, but she made a point of swinging wide as they passed me. She moved with a predatory grace, her heels clicking rhythmically on the concrete. As she brushed past, her shoulder checked mine hard enough to make me stumble back a step. It was a calculated move, disguised as a clumsy accident. She leaned in close, the scent of her expensive perfume enveloping me, and hissed a few words meant only for my ears. "Poor thing, couldn't keep a man, and now you can't even keep a roof over your head. It is almost sad." I did not shove her back. I did not scream. I did not even blink. I slowly turned my head away from them and looked toward the towering glass doors of the courthouse entrance. The reflection staring back at me was not the broken woman they expected to see. My face was terrifyingly calm. My eyes were dry. I looked like stone. A firm hand gripped my elbow. It was Daria Voss, my attorney. Her fingers dug into the fabric of my coat, a silent command to hold my ground. She leaned in close, her voice low and urgent. "Megan, breathe. Do not let them see you shake." I looked at Daria. Her face was tight with worry, but she did not understand what she was seeing. "I am not shaking, Daria. I am counting." At the bottom of the stairs, Ethan paused. He was beaming, basking in his victory. Suddenly, the phone in his hand began to vibrate violently. I could see the screen lighting up from where I stood. It buzzed once, twice, 3 times a persistent, demanding rhythm. Ethan glanced down at it, an annoyed expression flickering across his face. He scoffed, swiped his thumb across the screen to silence the call, and shoved the phone back into his pocket. He turned back to Blair, laughing at something she said. completely unaware of what he had just done. He had no idea that the call he just ignored was not a sales pitch or a wrong number. It was the first domino. As he reached for the door handle of a waiting cab, a cold gust of wind whipped my hair across my face, but I did not reach up to brush it away. Just laugh, I thought, the words forming in my mind with icy clarity. You think you are leaving this courthouse a winner, but you are walking straight into the trap I set. It takes a special kind of blindness to look at a cage and see a castle. For 6 years, that was my life. On paper, we were the power couple of Harbor Point. I was the design lead at Ridgewell Creative Labs, managing high-stakes branding projects for tech startups and fashion houses. Ethan was the director of business development at North Bay Freight Group, a man who moved logistics like chess pieces across a global board. We were young, successful, and enviable. Or at least, that is what the pictures on our mantle suggested. In the beginning, Ethan was not just a husband. He was an event. He had a terrifyingly accurate memory for the things that mattered to me. If I mentioned I liked a specific vintage of Pinot Noir in passing, a case would appear on the counter 2 days later. He knew exactly what to say to make the world feel safe and manageable. He made me feel small, but in a way that felt like being cherished rather than diminished. He would wrap his arms around me after I pulled a double shift and whisper into my hair, "You work too hard, Meg. Let me take care of the heavy lifting. You just shine." The first crack in the foundation was subtle, hidden under the guise of responsibility. It started about 2 years in, with a conversation about optimizing our future. He sat me down with spreadsheets and colorful graphs, explaining why separate bank accounts were archaic and inefficient. "We are a team, Megan," he said, his eyes earnest and wide, pleading for me to understand his logic. Why pay double the fees? Why split the growth? Trust me, babe. I do this for a living. Let me maximize us. I signed the papers. I handed over my autonomy because I thought I was handing over trust. Once the money was pooled, the questions started. At first, it was curiosity. Then, it became an interrogation. He wanted my email passwords in case of emergencies. He started tracking my calendar. When I complained about a difficult client at Ridgewell, his sympathy evaporated into condescension. "Come on, honey," he would say with a patronizing chuckle, patting my hand. "It is just drawing. It is not like you are moving tons of freight across the Pacific. Do not stress over pretty pictures." It was a slow drip of poison, designed to make me question my own worth. Then came the withdrawals. $500 here, $1,000 there. Cash withdrawals from ATMs in parts of the city he had no business being in. When I confronted him, showing him the bank alerts on my phone, he did not get angry. He got soft. He would wrap his arms around me and smile that disarming, boyish smile that had fooled me 1,000 times. It is just aggressive investment capital. Meg, crypto, startups, high risk, high reward. You have to spend money to make money. Do you trust me? And like a fool, I would nod. But the investments were followed by the silence. He started coming home past midnight, smelling of stale air and mints. His phone became a forbidden object. It spent its life face down on the table. When I asked why he changed his passcode for the 3rd time in a month, he sighed as if he were dealing with a petulant child. "You are being paranoid again. Megan, it is for work security. North Bay deals with sensitive contracts. Why are you always looking for problems?" The breaking point was not a scream, but a shimmer of gold. For our 6th anniversary, he presented me with a delicate diamond tennis bracelet. It was beautiful. I felt a surge of sickening guilt for doubting him. Later that night, while looking for a tax document in his study, I found the receipt crumpled in his jacket pocket. The date was correct. The item description matched. But under the recipient line, it did not say Megan. It said Blair. He had bought 2 identical bracelets, one for the wife to keep her quiet, and one for the mistress to keep her happy. That was the moment the stage lights went out. I realized the man I married never existed. I stared at the receipt until the ink blurred in my vision. I did not fall in love with a bad man from the start, I whispered to the empty room. I fell in love with a man who was excellent at playing a good one. The annual end-of-year gala at the Harbor Point Country Club was the kind of event Ethan lived for. The room was suffocatingly opulent, filled with crystal chandeliers, oversized floral arrangements, and the most influential people in the city's logistics and shipping sectors. I stood by his side in a silk emerald gown, playing the part of the supportive wife, completely unaware that I was actually the sacrificial lamb. Halfway through the dinner, Ethan tapped his spoon against his champagne glass. The sharp ringing sound cut through the murmurs of the crowd. He stood up, adjusting his tuxedo jacket, and flashed that charming, self-deprecating smile that made everyone trust him instantly. "I want to make a toast," he began, his voice dripping with honey. "To my wife, Megan. For 6 years, she has been the anchor of my life." The room applauded politely. I forced a smile, though my stomach churned with an unease I could not name. Then, the air in the room shifted. Ethan looked down at the tablecloth, his shoulders slumping as if he were carrying the weight of the world. But honesty is the foundation of this community, isn't it? And it breaks my heart to stand here and admit that my foundation is crumbling. He looked up, his eyes wet with fake tears. I have tried to hide it. I tried to cover up the missing funds. $10,000 here, $5,000 there. I told myself it was a mistake, but I cannot protect her anymore. Not when the money is going to him. The silence that followed was deafening. Every head turned toward me. My breath hitched in my throat. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Ethan, what are you talking about?" He did not answer me directly. Instead, he pulled a folded stack of papers from his inner jacket pocket and tossed them onto the table. They were bank statements, highlighted in neon yellow. The joint account, Megan, empty. All of it funneled to a private account I didn't know existed until yesterday. I assume that is where you are meeting him. Before I could even process the lie, a hand touched my shoulder. It was Blair. She was wearing a modest black dress, looking for all the world like a concerned friend rather than the woman sleeping with my husband. She had tears in her eyes. "Oh, Megan, I told him to wait," she said, her voice trembling with theatrical sorrow. "I begged him to give you another chance. We all make mistakes, but stealing from your own family, how could you?" The room began to whisper. I felt like I was drowning on dry land. This was not just a breakup. This was a public execution. I looked around the room, desperate for a friendly face, and locked eyes with a woman standing near the bar. It was Daria Voss. She was not looking at me with pity. She was looking at Ethan with clinical detachment. As I stumbled past her, fleeing the room, I heard her murmur to the person next to her, "Textbook character assassination. He is burying her before the body is even cold." The drive home was silent. Ethan drove with a calm, relaxed demeanor, humming along to the radio. When we got inside our house, the mask fell off completely. He walked straight to the master bedroom and stood in the doorway, blocking my entry. "You are sleeping in the guest room tonight," he said, his voice flat and devoid of the emotion he had displayed at the gala. "My lawyer will send over the divorce agreement in the morning. You are going to sign it." I stood in the hallway, still wearing my gown, shivering slightly. "And if I don't," Ethan smirked, leaning against the doorframe, "then I make a few calls to the board at Ridgewell. I have enough proof of your financial instability to make sure you never manage a budget again. You will lose your job. Megan, sign the papers, take the small settlement, and leave, or I will burn your career to the ground." He waited for me to cry. He waited for me to beg, but the shock of the evening was hardening into something colder, something sharp. I looked him dead in the eye. "I will sign," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos in my mind. "When I understand what I am signing." Ethan laughed, shook his head as if I were a slow child, and slammed the bedroom door in my face. I heard the lock click. He thought he had won. He did not know that by cornering me, he had forced me to stop being his wife and start being his opponent. The guest room became my war room. For weeks, I did not sleep. I watched. I became a ghost in my own house, documenting every breath Ethan took. I bought a simple black notebook and started logging the discrepancies. Tuesday, he said he was at a client dinner at the Chop House, but the toll tag records showed his car crossing the bridge to the industrial district at 8 p.m. Wednesday, a withdrawal of $400 from our emergency savings. Thursday, an email confirmation for a consultation fee from a person named RC popped up on the shared iPad before he could delete it. I started digging into the credit reports. That was when the first real blow landed. I found a credit card, a platinum business line, opened in the name of Callahan Design, a sole proprietorship I had never registered. It was linked to my Social Security number. The balance was sitting at $25,000. He was not just spending our money, he was building a debt prison and putting my name on the bars. But the smoking gun was not in the bank statements. It was in the trunk of his Audi. Ethan had always been obsessive about his car, but lately, he had been anxious about the spare tire well. On a Tuesday morning, while he was in the shower, I took his keys and went to the garage. I lifted the heavy liner of the trunk and moved the jack. Taped to the underside of the plastic toolkit was a burner phone. It was a cheap, prepaid model. My hands trembled as I pressed the power button. The screen lit up, asking for a 4-digit passcode. I tried his birthday. Nothing. I tried our anniversary. Nothing. Then, with a sick feeling in my stomach, I typed in October 4th, Blair's birthday. The phone unlocked. It was a catalog of betrayal. There were photos of them at the Ritz-Carlton on dates he told me he was at logistics conferences. There were texts mocking my cooking, my clothes, my desperation. But then I found the Notes app. There was a single file titled Exit Plan. I opened it and felt the blood drain from my face. It was not just a breakup strategy, it was a demolition guide. Step 1. Drain joint liquidity. Claim bad investments. Step 2. Max out credit in her name. Ruin credit score to prevent refinancing. Step 3. The gala. Public humiliation. Step 4. Make her look unstable. HR will do the rest. I stared at that last line until my eyes burned. He was planning to gaslight me until I snapped, then use my reaction to get me fired from Ridgewell. He wanted me unemployed, bankrupt, and broken, so I would sign whatever settlement he threw at me just to survive. I took photos of every screen with my own phone, returned the burner to its hiding place, and drove straight to Daria's office. I threw the evidence on her desk, my breathing ragged. "I have him, Daria," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "I have everything. The fraud, the identity theft, the conspiracy. We can bury him. Let's file the motion today." Daria picked up the photos, studying them with a terrifying calmness. She shook her head slowly. "No, not yet." "What do you mean, not yet? He is stealing my identity. He is trying to destroy my career." "Megan, listen to me," Daria said, leaning forward, her eyes hard. "If we strike now, he claims the credit card was a misunderstanding. He claims the phone was a joke. He has better lawyers and deeper pockets right now. We do not want to sting him. We want to kill him. We need to know where the money is going. If we prove fraud, we get everything. If we just prove he is a jerk, you get half of nothing." She slid a business card across the desk. It was heavy, cream-colored stock with a single name, Quinn Mercer. Forensic accounting. Go to Quinn. Find the money. I met Quinn in a small coffee shop 2 towns over. He was a quiet man who looked more like a librarian than a financial hunter. But when he opened his laptop, he was a surgeon. I gave him access to the few statements I had managed to photograph. He worked in silence for 20 minutes, tapping keys with a rhythmic precision. Then he stopped. He turned the screen toward me. "You see this recurring transfer?" Quinn asked, pointing to a line item for $3,000. Ethan labeled it consulting fees for a firm called Vestra Logistics. "It looks legit on the surface." "Is it Blair?" I asked. "Is he paying her?" "That is what he wants it to look like," Quinn said, adjusting his glasses. "But I ran a search on the routing number and the registered address of Vestra Logistics. It is a shell company. It has no employees, no website, and the registered address—" He pulled up a map view. "It is not a condo. It is a warehouse." I squinted at the screen. The address looked familiar. Then it hit me. That is North Bay Freight Group," I whispered. "That is his company's overflow warehouse." Quinn nodded slowly. "Exactly. He is not just hiding money from you, Megan. He is funneling money out of your marriage and into a shell company that sits right inside his own employer's backyard. If he is moving marital assets through a fraudulent vendor scheme at work, he is not just a bad husband, he is a felon." I sat back in the booth, the noise of the coffee shop fading away. I realized then that the USB drive I would eventually carry to court would need to hold more than just pictures of a mistress. Ethan had gotten greedy, and in his greed, he had left a trail of breadcrumbs right to his own execution. "We are not just proving adultery anymore, Megan," Daria told me, her voice low and clinical as she laid out the new strategy on her mahogany desk. "We are building a psychological profile. The judge needs to see a pattern: manipulation, financial coercion, identity theft. We do not just want a divorce. We want a dismantling." I nodded, absorbing the shift in our warfare. The time for tears was over. Now was the time for performance. That evening, I went home and played the role Ethan wanted to see. I sat at the kitchen table with a stack of unpaid bills, looking small and overwhelmed. When he walked in, smelling of Blair's cloying vanilla perfume, I did not scream. I did not ask where he had been. Instead, I looked up with watery eyes, my hands trembling just enough to sell the lie. "Ethan, I don't understand these tax forms," I said, pitching my voice to sound fragile. "I am just so tired. Maybe you are right. Maybe I am not handling things well." Ethan's chest puffed out. He loved this version of me, the broken bird. He walked over, loosened his tie, and gave me a pitying smile that made my skin crawl. "I told you, Meg," he said, patting my head like I was a golden retriever. "You are spiraling. Just let the lawyers handle it. Sign the papers, and you won't have to worry about math anymore." I let him believe he had won. I let him believe I was too weak to fight. But the next morning, while he was at work bragging about his impending freedom, I was at the bank. I sat in the office of Mr. Henderson, the branch manager who had known my father. I slid a document across his desk. It was a loan application for $50,000, secured against my grandmother's jewelry collection assets I had specifically kept separate from the marriage. "Mr. Henderson, I need you to look at this signature," I said quietly. He adjusted his spectacles, squinting at the bottom of the page. "Well, it looks like yours. Megan. A bit rushed, perhaps. Look at the loop on the G. Mr. Henderson, I have never looped my G in my life. And look at the date. I was in Chicago for the Design Expo on the 12th. Mr. Henderson paled. He looked from the paper to me, realizing the implication. "Megan, are you saying this is fraudulent?" "I am saying I did not sign it," I replied, my voice steady. "I need certified copies of this, and I need a mesmerizingly detailed audit of who authorized the funds release." While I was gathering evidence of forgery, Quinn was busy untangling the web of Ethan's investments. He called me later that afternoon, his tone grim. "He is moving fast. Megan," Quinn said. He transferred ownership of the lakeside cabin, the one you two bought in cash 3 years ago, to a holding company called Obsidian Corp. Obsidian? I asked, writing the name down on my legal pad. Who owns it? Technically an anonymous trust, but I dug into the incorporation papers. The registered agent is a man named Lucas Fry. I froze. Lucas Fry is his college roommate, the one who dropped out to play poker online? Exactly, Quinn said. Ethan sold the cabin to Lucas for $10. He is parking assets outside the marriage, so there is nothing left for you to claim. He thinks he is clever, but he used a template contract he downloaded from the internet. It is sloppy. I took all of this to Daria. She looked at the forged loan and the sham sale of the cabin, and a shark-like smile spread across her face. We have enough for an emergency injunction, she said. We could freeze his assets today. No, I said, surprising myself with the coldness of my own voice. Not yet. Daria raised an eyebrow. Explain. If we freeze him now, he panics. He covers his tracks. He destroys the burner phone. I want him to feel safe. I want him to walk into that courtroom thinking he is 10 minutes away from a victory party. Daria nodded slowly, respect dawning in her eyes. You want to wait until he testifies. You want him to lie under oath about his assets before we drop the hammer. Exactly. Daria opened a folder and slid a single sheet of paper toward me. Then you should know who you are dealing with. My investigator ran a deep background check on Blair. I looked at the photo of the woman who had sneered at me on the courthouse steps. Her name was listed as Blair Vane, but under aliases, there was another name, Rebecca Sneed. She is not just a mistress, Megan, Daria said. She is a professional liability. She changed her name 4 years ago in Arizona after a lawsuit involving an elderly boyfriend and a missing retirement fund. She isn't in love with Ethan. She is working him, and he is too arrogant to see it. I looked at the mugshot from Arizona. It was younger, less polished, but the eyes were the same predatory and empty. Ethan thought he was the player, but he was just another mark. I closed the folder. A calm sensation settled over me. It was not peace, but it was close. It was the feeling of a hunter who had just checked the wind and found it perfect. They wanted a spectacle, I whispered to the empty office. They wanted to drag me into the spotlight and watch me bleed. Fine, if they like the stage. I will give them a performance they will never forget. The legal paperwork arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning, delivered by a process server who refused to make eye contact. I stood in the doorway and read the motion for dissolution of marriage. It was not just a request for divorce. It was a manifesto of lies. Ethan was filing for emergency temporary orders, citing my gross financial irresponsibility and, even worse, volatile mental instability. He was asking for immediate, exclusive use of the house and the Audi because he claimed he did not feel safe living with me. The hearing was scheduled for Thursday. When I walked into the courtroom, the air felt heavy and stale. Ethan was already there, sitting at the petitioner's table with his lawyer, a man named Sterling who wore a suit that cost more than my first car. Ethan looked devastated. He had perfected the look of the grieving husband forced to make a hard choice. In the gallery sat Blair. She had abandoned her usual plunging necklines for a high-collared navy blouse and a long skirt. She looked like a Sunday school teacher. She dabbed at dry eyes with a tissue, but when she saw me looking, she lowered the tissue just enough to flash a small, triumphant smirk. The proceedings began, and I had to grip the edge of the table to keep from shaking. Ethan took the stand. His voice was low, trembling with performative sadness. Your Honor, I hate to be here, Ethan said, looking down at his hands. I love my wife, but the spending, it is out of control, and her temper. Last week, she threw a vase at the wall because I asked about a credit card bill. She screamed that she would burn the house down before she let me have it. I am afraid. I am truly afraid she might hurt herself or destroy the property. My head snapped up. That is a lie. I started to rise, my voice cracking. I never! Daria's hand slammed down on my wrist. Her grip was iron. She leaned in, her voice a sharp hiss in my ear. Sit down. Do not say a word. If you yell, you prove him right. Let him speak. Let him put it all on the record. I sank back into my chair, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I listened as he wove a tapestry of fiction. He described nights of rage that never happened. He described threats I never made. He painted me as a monster, and he was the long-suffering saint trying to contain the damage. The judge, a tired-looking man with thinning hair, looked over his glasses at me. He did not see the woman who had been gaslit and robbed. He saw the unstable woman Ethan had described. Given the volatility described, the judge said, rubbing his temple, the court grants the petitioner temporary exclusive use of the marital residence and the primary vehicle. The respondent has 72 hours to vacate the premises. 72 hours. I had 3 days to pack 6 years of my life into cardboard boxes and leave the home I had paid to decorate. The gavel banged down, a sound of finality that rang in my ears. As the courtroom cleared, Ethan walked past the defense table. He stopped just inches from me. The sad, grieving husband mask vanished instantly, replaced by a cold, predatory sneer. He leaned in, his breath warm against my ear. See, he whispered, you don't have a chance. You are nothing without me. He straightened up and walked away, buttoning his jacket. I watched him join Blair in the hallway. She took his arm, and they walked out into the daylight, leaving me standing in the shadows of the courtroom. That night, I lay on a lumpy beige sofa in my friend Sarah's living room. The ceiling fan spun in a slow, hypnotic circle. I stared at it until my eyes watered. I felt hollowed out. Ethan was winning. He had the house. He had the car. He had the narrative. He was playing the surface game better than I ever could because he had no conscience to weigh him down. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I reached for it sluggishly, expecting another bill or a taunting email from Ethan. It was a text from Daria. 2 sentences that cut through the darkness of the room. Tomorrow. We start flipping the table. The scope of Ethan's betrayal expanded from a domestic tragedy into a federal felony within the span of 48 hours. I was sitting in Quinn's office, staring at a projector screen that looked like a conspiracy theorist's wall map. Quinn had connected the dots between Vestra Logistics and 3 other shell companies, Obsidian Corp's Apex Haulage, and something called Red Line Solutions. It is a laundry cycle. Megan, Quinn said, tapping the screen with a laser pointer. He approves a fake invoice from Redline for logistics consulting. North Bay pays Redline. Redline pays Vestra for subcontracting. So, Vestra pays a dividend to a private account in the Caymans. He is not just hiding marital assets. He is embezzling from his own employer. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I opened my laptop and pulled up the archived emails I had downloaded from the burner phone. Quinn, look at this. Who is R.C.? I spun the laptop around. There was an email chain between Ethan and a user identified only as R.C. The subject line was simply inventory audit. The content was chillingly vague. R.C. The internal auditors are sniffing around the warehouse B-logs. Is the shipment clean, Ethan? It will be clean by Friday. I am washing the paperwork through the divorce filings. No one looks at a man whose wife is bleeding him dry. Daria, who was leaning against the window, turned around slowly. Her face was pale. He is using the divorce as a smokescreen, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. He is generating massive legal expenses and settlement costs to justify large cash movements. If anyone asks where the money went, he points at you. Megan, this isn't just adultery. This is grand larceny and money laundering. I was still processing the fact that I was married to a criminal when my own phone rang. It was the HR director at Ridgewell Creative Labs. Her voice was stiff. Megan, we need you to come up to the 4th floor immediately. Bring your laptop. When I walked into the HR office, The atmosphere was suffocating. The director sat behind her desk with a grim expression. She slid a manila folder toward me. "We received a formal complaint this morning from a concerned citizen," she said. "It alleges that you have been using company proprietary software for personal vendettas, and, well, it raises concerns about your mental stability and potential substance abuse." I opened the folder. Inside was a printed letter detailing my erratic behavior and paranoia. But what made my blood freeze were the photographs attached. They were grainy pictures of me leaving the office late at night, looking disheveled. One was taken from across the street, another from the parking garage. "Who sent this?" I asked, though I already knew. "It was anonymous," the director said, "but they claimed to be a friend trying to help." I looked closely at the metadata on the bottom of the printed email header. The sender was listed as Civic Watchdog 88. I remembered the passcode on the burner phone. Blair's birthday was in 1988. "This was not a concerned citizen," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. "This is the woman my husband is having an affair with. She is stalking me. Megan, these are serious accusations regarding your work. And here is the data to refute them," I interrupted, plugging my laptop into the monitor on her desk. I pulled up my server logs. Every minute of my machine time is accounted for. These late nights correlate exactly to the upload timestamps for the erratic deliverables on the Horizon project. I was not plotting a vendetta. I was doing my job. I walked out of that office 20 minutes later with my job intact, but my hands were shaking uncontrollably. They were not just trying to take my money. They were hunting me. I went straight to Daria's office. She listened to the story about HR, her eyes narrowing into slits. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. "Get me Jude Halston," she said into the receiver. Then she looked at me. "No more forensic accounting from a distance. We need boots on the ground. Jude is a former fraud investigator. I want him on Ethan's bumper 24 hours a day." 2 days later, Jude sent us a surveillance package. We met in Daria's conference room to review the footage. It was grainy, shot with a long-range lens, but the subjects were unmistakable. The video showed the underground parking structure of a law firm downtown, not Ethan's divorce lawyer, but a different firm known for criminal defense. Ethan and Blair were standing by the trunk of his Audi. Blair looked nervous, constantly checking over her shoulder. Ethan handed a thick yellow envelope to a man in a gray suit. Jude's voice narrated the clip from the speakerphone. "The man in the suit is Marcus Thorne. He specializes in federal plea bargains. I couldn't get audio of the whole conversation, but I caught the end on the screen." Ethan laughed that same arrogant laugh from the courthouse steps and clapped the lawyer on the shoulder. "Wait for it," Jude said. The audio crackled, and then Ethan's voice came through, tinny but clear. "Just get the paperwork ready. Marcus, after the final hearing on Friday, she is out on the street, and I am in the clear. Step out of the courtroom, and it is all done." I stared at the screen. Ethan believed Friday was the finish line. He thought he was buying his freedom. He had no idea he had just been recorded handing over what looked suspiciously like a bribe or a retainer to a criminal defense attorney. "He thinks it ends on Friday," I said, looking at Daria. Daria smiled, but it was a cold, terrifying expression. "Oh, it ends on Friday. Megan. But not the way he thinks." We filed the motion for deep discovery on a Monday morning. It was not a polite request for information. It was a scorched earth demand. We asked for everything 5 years of tax returns, unredacted bank statements for every account bearing his Social Security number, and specifically, the original copies of every consulting contract he had signed since his promotion. Daria sent it over with a courier, ensuring it landed on his lawyer's desk with a heavy thud. Ethan reacted exactly as we predicted. By noon, a courier arrived at my temporary housing with a thick leather binder. It was a settlement agreement. It was dense, filled with legal jargon, and surprisingly generous on the surface. He was offering me a lump sum of $75,000 and no contest on the divorce decree, provided I signed within 24 hours and waived my right to further discovery. It was hush money. My phone rang 10 minutes later. It was Ethan. "Megan, look at the offer," he said, his voice smooth, trying to sound reasonable. "I am trying to help you here. If we keep fighting, the lawyers will eat everything. You will end up with zero. Just sign it, and we can both move on." "Don't be stupid." I held the phone away from my ear, letting his condescension wash over me. I needed him to think I was wavering. I needed him to think I was scared of the legal bills. "Ethan, I don't know," I stammered, injecting a tremor into my voice. "It is a lot of paperwork. I can't read it all in a day. I need time. Give me 48 hours. He sighed, a loud, impatient sound. "Fine. 48 hours. But if I don't have a signature by Thursday noon, the offer is off the table, and I sue you for legal fees." He hung up. I set the phone down and looked at Daria. She was already typing. "He gave us 48 hours, I said. "Perfect." Daria replied without looking up. "That is exactly enough time to get the subpoenas to the banks before he realizes we are not settling." While Ethan waited for my surrender, we went to work. The silence from our side was not inactivity. It was the quiet of a submarine lining up a torpedo. On Wednesday morning, Jude walked into the office and slapped a manila envelope onto the table. "He is cleaning house," Jude said. "I tracked him yesterday evening. He rented a U-Haul van and drove it to the loading dock at North Bay Freight. He loaded 12 boxes into the back, then drove straight to a self-storage facility on the outskirts of town." Jude slid a photo across the table. It showed Ethan, looking over his shoulder, pushing a dolly stacked with file boxes. "I checked the rental registry," Jude continued. "Unit 402. It is not in his name. It is rented to a Mr. Stephen Vane. That is Blair's cousin. He is hiding the physical evidence," Daria mused. "The digital trail is one thing, but those boxes, those are the smoking guns." Then Quinn walked in, looking more animated than I had ever seen him. He was holding a highlighted spreadsheet. "I found the car money," Quinn announced. "Remember the $60,000 he claimed he withdrew to buy that vintage Mustang he never actually brought home? He told the court it was a failed restoration project." "I remember," I said. "He said he sold it for parts at a loss." "He never bought a car," Quinn said, dropping the paper in front of me. "I traced the withdrawal to a cashier's check. It was cashed at a check cashing place in Atlantic City. 2 days later, a known bookie in New Jersey deposited a curiously similar amount. Ethan did not buy a Mustang. Megan. He paid off a gambling debt, and he paid a loan shark." I stared at the numbers. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. He had berated me for buying generic brand coffee to save 50 cents, while he was hemorrhaging tens of thousands of dollars to cover bad bets. He is walking into that courtroom on Friday thinking the judge will only see the sanitized summary he prepared, I said, the realization settling in my chest like a cold stone. He thinks the discovery waiver I am supposed to sign will bury all of this. Daria sat back in her chair, steepled her fingers, and looked at me. "The hearing is in 2 days. He expects you to come in defeated, holding that signed settlement." "He expects me to fold," I said. "Then let him expect it," Daria said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "In the next session, I am going to let his lawyer batter you a little. I am going to let Ethan think he is winning. I want him to feel so safe that he laughs. I want him to be the loudest man in the room." I looked at her, understanding the brutal necessity of the plan. "So that when he falls from the highest possible height." "Exactly," Daria said. "But we need one more thing to make it stick. The paper trail is good, but we need a voice." I nodded. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I had memorized but never called. It rang 3 times before a hesitant voice answered. It was a junior logistics manager at North Bay, a young man Ethan had blamed for a missing shipment last year to cover his own tracks. "Hello." "This is Megan Callahan," I said softly. "I know what he did to you. and I know you are afraid, but if you testify, I can promise you that by Monday morning, he won't be your boss anymore." There was a long silence on the other end, followed by a shaky exhale. I can't lose my job, Mrs. Callahan." "You won't," I promised. "But if you help me, we can make sure the man who actually stole from the company is the one who leaves in handcuffs." "Okay," the voice whispered. "Okay, tell me where to go." I hung up the phone. The trap was set. The bait was laid. The storm was gathering. But for now, the air was perfectly, terrifyingly still. Friday morning arrived with the weight of a funeral. Inside courtroom 4B, the air was stale, smelling of floor wax and old anxiety. Ethan sat at the petitioner's table, looking the picture of corporate success and moral rectitude. He had brought a binder 3 inches thick, tabbed and color-coded, filled with the fabricated reality he had spent months constructing. His lawyer, Mr. Sterling, wasted no time in going for the throat. He did not just argue for asset control, he painted me as a liability to my own survival. "Your Honor, Mrs. Callahan has no liquidity," Sterling boomed, gesturing toward me as if I were a piece of discarded furniture. "She has exhausted her personal credit lines. She is currently under investigation by her employer for erratic conduct. To leave the marital assets in her hands would be negligent. Mr. Callahan is simply asking to stop the bleeding." I sat perfectly still, my hands clasped in my lap. Daria had coached me to remain impassive, but it felt like being flayed alive while the audience watched. Behind Ethan, Blair sat in her modest disguise, but every time I glanced back, her eyes were sharp, mocking. She offered a small, pitying smile that was more insulting than a slap. Then came the blow I had not expected. Daria stood up to introduce our key witness, the junior logistics manager from North Bay who was ready to testify about the inventory manipulation. "Your Honor, we call Michael Trent to the stand," Daria announced. Sterling shot up from his chair before the name was fully spoken. "Objection relevance. This is a divorce hearing, Your Honor, not a corporate audit. Mr. Trent is a disgruntled former subordinate of my client. His testimony is hearsay and has no bearing on the division of household property." The judge, already weary and looking at the clock, sighed and rubbed his temples. "Sustained. Let's keep this focused on the marriage. Ms. Voss, we are not litigating a wrongful termination suit here." I felt the blood drain from my face. That was our bridge. That was the link between the domestic finances and the corporate fraud. Without him, we looked like we were grasping at straws. Daria squeezed my arm under the table, her grip bruising. "Steady," she whispered. "We have other ways." But the momentum had shifted. The judge looked over his glasses, his decision already made. Based on the financial instability presented, the court grants the petitioner, Ethan Callahan, temporary exclusive use of the marital residence and the primary vehicle. Furthermore, Mr. Callahan is granted temporary conservatorship of the joint investment accounts until a final audit can be completed. The gavel banged down. It sounded like a gunshot. Ethan let out a long, audible exhale, slumping forward as if the relief were overwhelming. Then he turned to look at me. The mask of the grieving husband vanished. In its place was a look of pure, unadulterated triumph. He had stripped me of my home, my car, and my dignity in under 2 hours. I gathered my purse and walked out. The heavy oak doors swung open, and the bright, harsh sunlight of Harbor Point hit us. Ethan and Blair were right ahead of me. They stepped out onto the wide limestone landing, the city bustling below them. Ethan stopped. He threw his head back and laughed, a loud, booming sound that echoed off the pillars. He wrapped his arm around Blair, pulling her close, not caring who saw them anymore. He turned back to look at me, his eyes dancing with malice. "The house! The car! All mine!" he shouted, his voice carrying over the traffic. He winked at me, a gesture so casual and cruel it took my breath away. Better luck next life, Meg. Blair leaned into him, whispering something that made him chuckle again. They looked invincible. They looked like the kings of the world. I stood in the shadow of the doorway, motionless. I did not cry. I did not scream. I slowly lifted my left wrist and looked at the face of my watch. It was 11:47 in the morning. Just wait, I whispered to myself, my heart beating a slow, steady rhythm against my ribs. Ethan turned to walk down the stairs, his hand resting possessively on Blair's lower back. He took one step, then another. At exactly 11:48, a sound cut through the air. It was not a normal ringtone. It was the harsh, jarring buzzing of a phone vibrating violently against a hard surface. Ethan paused. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, annoyed at the interruption to his victory lap. Blair looked down at the screen, and her smile faltered. Even from 10 feet away, I could see the color drain from her face. It was not a call. It was a priority alert. Ethan frowned, thumb hovering over the decline button. He laughed again, shaking his head. Persistent, aren't they? He muttered, preparing to slide the phone back into his pocket. He had no idea that the man on the other end of that line was not a telemarketer. He had no idea that in the 60 seconds since the gavel fell, the real verdict had just been signed. Ethan ignored the phone, but Daria did not ignore the opportunity. She grabbed my arm with a force that almost hurt, her eyes scanning a notification on her own tablet. "Get back inside," she commanded, her voice cutting through the noise of the traffic. "The clerk just flagged the emergency motion. The judge has seen the fraud alert." We rushed back into the courtroom just as the judge was buttoning his robe to leave. He stopped when he saw the bailiff whisper in his ear. He sat back down, his face darkening into a mask of fury. He beckoned for Ethan's lawyer, who looked confused, and then glared at the empty door where Ethan had just exited. "Get the petitioner back in here," the judge barked. "Now!" While the bailiff went to retrieve Ethan, Quinn stepped forward and slapped a new file onto the bench. It was the kill shot. "Your Honor, this is a certified forensic analysis of the consulting payments," Quinn stated, his voice ringing with authority. "We have traced the wire transfers from the marital accounts directly to a shell corporation registered to a storage unit. And we have a sworn affidavit from a handwriting expert confirming that the signature on the loan guarantee for that shell corporation is a forgery. Mr. Callahan signed his wife's name to $1 million liability." The courtroom went silent. The air pressure seemed to drop. This was no longer a dispute about who kept the toaster. This was a federal crime scene. Jude walked up and placed a glossy photograph on the judge's desk. "And here are photos taken yesterday of Mr. Callahan moving physical evidence of this fraud into a storage unit rented under the name of his mistress's cousin." The twist was sickeningly brilliant. Ethan had not just stolen from me. He had set me up as the fall guy. He had forged my name on the debt so that when the shell company inevitably collapsed, the creditors would come for me and he would walk away clean. The judge looked up just as Ethan was shoved back into the room by the bailiff. Ethan looked annoyed, checking his watch, clearly thinking this was a minor procedural delay. "Mr. Callahan," the judge said, his voice dangerously quiet, "I am immediately revoking the temporary orders. I am freezing every asset under your control. And I am issuing a bench warrant for the surrender of all electronic devices." Ethan blinked. "Excuse me, Your Honor, I don't understand." "You don't have to understand," the judge snapped. "You just have to comply. The marital residence and the vehicle are awarded to Mrs. Callahan, effective immediately, pending a criminal investigation into fraud and perjury." Ethan stood paralyzed. He looked at his lawyer, but Mr. Sterling was already backing away, distancing himself from the radioactive client beside him. We walked out of the courtroom for the second time. This time, the dynamic had inverted. Ethan stumbled out onto the limestone steps, looking pale. Blair was waiting for him, scrolling on her phone, looking bored. "Finally," she said, looking up. "Can we go? I have a spa appointment at 2. Before Ethan could answer, 2 men in dark suits stepped out from behind the pillars. They did not look like local police. They carried the heavy bureaucratic weight of federal authority. "Ethan Callahan," one of them asked, flashing a badge. "We need you to come with us to answer some questions regarding wire fraud and embezzlement. We also have a warrant for your phone." Blair gasped, dropping her clutch. She looked at the agents, then at Ethan, and her face twisted in panic. "I didn't know!" she shrieked, stepping away from him as if he were contagious. "He told me it was his money. I am just the girlfriend. I have nothing to do with this." Ethan turned to her, his mouth open in betrayal, but she was already retreating into the crowd. He spun around, searching for an ally, and his eyes locked on mine. For the first time in months, I saw genuine fear. He looked at me with a desperate, silent plea for mercy. He wanted me to tell them it was a mistake. He wanted the wife who used to fix his problems. I just stared at him. It was like looking at a stranger. Daria stepped forward and cleared her throat. She held up a copy of the court order, the ink still wet. "The keys, Ethan," Daria said calmly. "To the house. And the car. Hand them over." Ethan looked at the Audi parked at the curb. The car he had bragged was all his just 10 minutes ago. His hand shook as he dug into his pocket. He pulled out the fob and dropped it into my open palm. The agents took his arms. The man who had walked out like a king was being led away like a common thief. I closed my fingers around the warm plastic of the key fob. I took a deep breath, tasting the clean, sharp air of freedom. I walked to the edge of the steps and looked down at him one last time. "You laughed when you walked out," I said softly, my voice steady enough for him to hear over the sirens approaching in the distance. "I stayed silent because I was waiting for you to walk in." Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below and let's chat. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please subscribe to the Mia Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so more people can hear this story.